Well, ladies and gentlemen, it took a week off. Got to recharge the batteries here. We wear them out every week here on Around the Interruption, but we're back. We got Josh, we got Brian. I'm Matt Custodio, and uh, this comes a weird time, right? So obviously, everything in sports on this day and last night are changing by the second. But we're going to focus on what has been, and that is the Bruins, as we have now lost one of our participants.
Right.
That's the Bruins beating the Canes and getting curb stomped by the Lightning. That is the Celtics sweeping the Sixers and Brett Brown right out of a job. And then Brian and I will probably talk about, are there any untouchables in terms of trade market on the Red Sox? So guys, welcome. Josh, we'll get your reactions first here about last night's Bruins game.
I'll tell you what. Let me just put it to you in layman's terms. It is the first time in my entire life that I think I have turned off a Bruins game in the play, not in the regular. I've turned plenty of those off, but it is the first time I have ever turned off a Bruins game. And let me just put it to you as simply as possible. Brett Ritchie or Nick Ritchie, whatever god awful Ritchie brother we have now, is an absolute flub. That guy stinks so badly. He is so awful in so many ways. And Bruce Cassidy outcoached himself last night. I don't know why he went with a different lineup than he did. I don't know why he went with 7 defensemen. I don't understand any of that. It makes literally no sense to me. It was always going to be hard because Halak is 35 years old and playing back-to-back playoff games after an overtime was going to be a shit show no matter what. But embarrassing, no effort, just a bad show of it, a really, really bad show of it.
And I think you're 100% right, Josh, right? So the big thing is obviously Corrali was injured. Sure. You understand that replacement. I've been calling for studs all playoff series long. I don't care that this is a more physical series. I could put a twig out there and he'd be more physical and more skillful than Anders Bjork. So I would have thrown studs in there as a 1-2 swap. You have 3 centers on that fourth line anyways. One of them could play third line center for one night. And then why you put in Jeremy Lauzon and John Moore, both of who I think were combined -5 on the night, is just unbeknownst to me, right? There's a reason they haven't played in any of these games except maybe one round robin game. So he can say he was outcoached and he can say the team's going to come back better for game 4 if and whenever that is. It doesn't make up that you made 3 blatantly horrible decisions and now you got curb stomped. And honestly, I hope they come back, but if they don't, I wouldn't be shocked because this team looked dead in the second period last night.
They should have put the Zamboni driver in as the goalie instead of the stiff they put in after 4-1. I mean, who's the guy there? What's his name? He's undefeated in Toronto, right?
The emergency
Yeah,
goalkeeper,
he's
the Zamboni
undefeated in
driver,
Toronto. Yeah, he gonna slid him in there. I don't know.
it would have been great. So going forward, Josh, do you think Halak starts game 4? And then also, do you think they go back to their original lineup given perfect health?
Yeah, I mean, for me, the biggest thing is you got to get Charlie Coyle some goddamn help. You have to get – he's been probably, for my money, outside of that Marchand in this series, he's been the best player throughout the entire playoffs so far for me. And he's got no help right now. The man needs some help. It's not good enough from Kathy. And I agree. I think Kuhlman and Stadnicka deserve a look at this point. Because I don't know what other options you really have. Because the guys in there right now are not getting it done. They're not getting it done. You need to get Coyle help is really what it comes down to. And again, there's no need to change the lineup at all. Obviously the Corrali, fine, whatever. But you had game 4 or game 2 as a possibility. Now you got game 4 has got to be must win whenever game 4 happens to be played, as we all know. Obviously, everything's in a shutdown now. We'll see if they win game 4. I still feel good about the series. If they don't win game 4, then it's over, and we just kind of have to go from there.
And I think it's tough because this team had so much potential. Obviously, they won the President's Trophy, and then the round robin was what it was. But it's just so infuriating that this team has the talent and the potential to play with them. I don't know if it's they don't care, if the coaching staff doesn't get them up for it, if they all shrink in the moment. I don't know what it is, but this team shows they have the potential. They have the best line in all of hockey when they play right. They have a top 10 defenseman in the league if McAvoy plays right. I don't know what it is that when they play these big games, all of a sudden this team that's the big bad Bruins that likes to hit, that brings people in to hit, they can score. They had 18 shots when I turned the game off last night. 18 in the third period. How do you have 18 shots in a Stanley Cup Finals game? If they lost the game 4-0, but they had 60, 65 shots on net, I'd be like, you know what? Whatever. Vasilevsky played amazing. It is what it is. But if you lose 1-0 and have 18 shots, let alone 7-1, you lose 1-0 and have 18 shots, I have a lot of questions. But
so that was my other thing too, is they do not shoot the puck enough. They don't. That first line especially pisses me off. They dipsy-daddle, they doodle a little bit. And you watch the other guys play Tampa there, they just throw everything in the net. It's basic. Playoff hockey is so defensive that the only way you can score regularly is by just literally throwing everything at the net, and eventually something goes in. And you have to play that way. You have to play that way if you're the Bruins. I don't understand it sometimes. It doesn't make a lot of sense to me. And I don't begrudge them. I think what you have to realize, and what I've determined is if they don't win this year, it's not really on them. The break is what it is. Everyone has to deal with it. But they're one of the older teams left at this point, and I can't imagine it's easy to be off for 4 months and then come back and play at that level, like Halak and Bergeron and Chara and Krejci and some of the other older guys on this team have to do now. Even Marchand, who's actually looked really good. It was a big ask to begin with, and I really can't begrudge them. I always thought if they didn't win this year, it was going to be the year they got robbed of a Stanley Cup. That's how I'm always going to look at this year, unless they find a way to do it.
You don't think they're healthier now than they would have been if there was no break?
I guess they're healthier, but my concern is it's like Char's 40-something years old. I mean, the guy, you're asking a lot of him to come in and be ready to go right away. That's a huge ask.
And mentally, he's had some pretty major lapses. That third goal in game 2 is 100% on him. There's no way you can let someone get behind you. And yet, obviously, it doesn't matter because they didn't learn from it. And in game 3, the same thing happened. They're cherry picking the Bruins back line because they're slow and playing out of position. So I definitely think that might have something to do with it. The last
Josh's favorite player, too, isn't even on the team anymore.
That's also true. I don't think we've had a full chance to talk about that. Tuukka Rask going home, Josh. Do you have any opinions or thoughts on it?
Yeah, we talked about it, and it's come out since that. Maybe he had a family emergency of some kind. I think it's kind of garbage. I mean, we all heard the rumor that he was out golfing. I think the fact that came out afterwards, like days later, and I get you want to have family privacy or whatever, but you just say family emergency right off the bat, and that's not what he said. He said he was opting out. He didn't say family emergency. He didn't say someone's sick. He said he was opting out, and that 2 nights after he said he wasn't feeling it vibe-wise. So I think I'm an anti-Tuukka Rask guy to begin with. I don't think he plays again for the Bruins personally. I don't know how you can bring that guy back. I don't know how.
How does that work? You trade him for pennies on the dollar, you get about 80% of a return, or what do you do?
If you trade Tuukka Rask, the way I look at it is it's even if you don't get a full return, it's a massive salary cap relief. And
so, go ahead, Josh.
Yeah, no, you find another goalie. You find someone else who can be a tandem with Halak, and whoever's hot going to the playoffs next year, that's who you ride.
So there is which is one of my last questions I wanted to get to on the Bruins was, so there's the possibility if they can dump Tuukka full way and they don't re-sign Krug, that opens up 12 to 13 million in cap space. Is that enough I don't want to say rebuild because I don't think this team needs to rebuild. Is it good enough? Is $13 million, especially in the strange COVID times of salary caps, to get this team where it needs to be so that Charlie Coyle isn't playing with Dumb and Dumber, that our fourth line doesn't have three guys that we're not sure if they're going to concede 4 goals or if they're going to play the best power play of their life? Is 13 million enough?
So I don't think the team needs a massive overhaul, but you have to be in a win now mentality because, your core is on their way out. And honestly, I could see Krejci he's been great in the playoffs, but I could see him being expendable. I think Coyle can play on that second line. That's another huge cap dump. You can get something for him. It'll be interesting to see what happens. Let's see what happens with Game 4, and then we'll go from there.
So as we wrap up our Bruins talk, we'll get to Josh. Brian, do you think the Bruins can come back and win the series, or do you think they're done?
Emotional roller coaster. It's like, okay, they're fine. They'll be all right. And then we haven't done a show in a while, and all of a sudden it's like they play a really good team in Tampa. And going into the season, it was Toronto and Tampa and Bruins. Those are the 2 teams you can get past those guys, you're gonna be fine. Toronto kind of fizzled out. Whatever happened with them. But you got Tampa Bay now, and this is probably the best team that the Bruins have played. But I don't know, like when you guys are talking, I don't know if it's a motivational thing. I look at what happened last year, against the Blues, and everyone going to that series is like, oh, okay, the Blues are, they're the flavor of the moment. The Bruins got this, and then they got this, and then they don't got this, and then they lose. I think if you lose against Tampa Bay, you're gonna have to make some moves, like you guys were saying, because it's just not working for whatever reason. They got I don't know, I wouldn't say too much talent, but it's just the group of guys right now for whatever reason it's not working. You're talking about shaking up, losing their goalie, and they got to replace him somehow. And then Krejci makes what, like $7 million, $6 million. He makes a bunch of money, and then you got another $12 million. That's a lot of money in hockey. That's a lot of money, especially because with COVID and they don't have a television deal. That's a lot of money to make something happen. Now you still have to get people to come here, and you can't sign stupid deals either. So they're going to have the ability to really change the face of the team. But hopefully they don't sign in these guys that are, 31, 32, who are going to be good for a year and then they're going to be stiffs. They got to be real careful.
And Josh, we'll wrap it up with you. Is your opinion still if they win Game 4, they have a shot? If they lose Game 4, they're done?
Yeah, Game 4 did it. If they win Game 4 and they look good, then I feel good about them the rest of the way. Because I think the great thing about the Bruins, and it was showed during the regular season too, is no one's better at coming back than they are. Whether it be in game or in a series. Let's see how they bounce back here. It was whatever, back to back. I don't care. I think they still have a shot if they win the next game. That's where I'm at right now. It's the next game. If they win, they can move on. And I really hope they do win, because I think the next team that they play, whether it be the Islanders or the Flyers, are inferior teams. In my opinion, this series is the Eastern Conference Finals, in my opinion.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. It makes complete sense. So as we kind of finish up our hockey talk, we know Josh might have to leave. So if you can stay, Josh, great. But if you have to take off, feel free at any moment. But we'll move on to the Celtics here. And they swept Philly. They kicked Brett Brown right out of a job. And I know Celtics fans were pretty happy because that series wasn't even close. And Brian, I'll let you get the first word here. Was it an impressive win, or have you never really been impressed with the Sixers? So it was we should have done it.
Well, I think going in, I think the 76ers with Simmons had the most talent from the neck down, not the neck up. Their coach, he talked about doing one thing, and then Embiid was saying, well, I need to get the ball more. They were all over the place. But they'd go on these runs where the Celtics would be up by 20, and then they'd kind of blow it. And during the regular season, they'd lose a lot of those games where, for whatever reason, they raided the ship here. I think the big thing in the playoffs this year for the Celtics is Kemba Walker is actually healthy. Where going into the playoffs, the way it was here, it was like yeah, he's got a real problem. They just don't want to talk about it, like a David Price or one of these guys who they're hurt. And they just don't want to talk about it. Whatever they did seemed to work. A couple of the games, I think he was a high scorer when they kind of double teamed Tatum, and Tatum wasn't, the 30-point scorer he is. Jaylen Brown played great. Losing Gordon Hayward didn't hurt him in this series, but it's probably going to hurt him in the next series. But because of things going on now, the playoffs have been pushed back a little bit, so I don't know if that will help them. But what it does hurt them in the early games, though, was Kyle Lowry turned his ankle, and I was hoping that they could play a couple games against the Raptors without Kyle Lowry because they're a lot easier to beat. Kyle Lowry and basically Gordon Hayward, they kind of neutralize each other. If you don't have to worry about Kyle Lowry, it's okay with us not having Gordon Hayward. A healthy Kyle Lowry for them, then they have the advantage, and Toronto's the better team. So if they couldn't attack him, if they couldn't attack, the Raptors without Kyle Lowry, it would have been a huge advantage for the Celtics.
Absolutely. Joshua, did you get to watch any? What were your thoughts on the series?
I did watch a good amount of basketball. I agree with all of Brian's points. I think the team looked really good. I think the series coming up here against Toronto, and I do have to leave in just a few moments here, so I'll get out as many thoughts as I can super fast. I think Marcus Smart and Jaylen Brown play good enough defense where Lowry might end up being not much of a huge factor in this series because I don't think he's going to be at 100% even if he plays.
Right.
The issue is going to be Serge Ibaka and Pascal Siakam.
Yep.
Because, you saw even in the Sixers series, Joel Embiid, when he was engaged, could basically do whatever he wants. I think Pascal Siakam and Serge Ibaka are far more engaged NBA players. That being said, with everything going on in the country right now, how engaged are any of these guys? Tough to say.
Right.
All that being said, I want my parting comment wants to be about LeBron James himself. I was telling people last night, if you think LeBron James is actually going to leave the bubble, you're high. Listen, let me put it to you this way. If the NBA players left the bubble and were actually out there like some of them were when they were on break leading marches and doing stuff like that, I'd have all the respect in the world for them. But my feeling was, if you think LeBron James was going to be up in bumhell, Wisconsin leading marches, I don't ever see him doing that. This is a man who backed communist China in their treatment of people in Hong Kong. Because the only thing that LeBron James cares about at the end of the day is LeBron James. And he realized that if he left the bubble, that he would be costing his teammates and probably himself millions of dollars in salary cap space and therefore salary going forward, which no one in the NBA obviously wants, and why would you? And the other thing he was doing is he was just making himself look good. That's what it was. It was, oh, well, look at me. I'm going to walk out because I'm a big giant crybaby and I'm in charge of the whole league, blah, blah, blah. Again, if they actually left, all the credit in the world to him, because whether this guy was a threat to police or not, whatever, it doesn't matter. You can't just be out here shooting people in the street. You can't do that. Most police officers wouldn't do that. That's beyond the point. Obviously, something has to give in the country, so if they feel they got to leave and go do it, fine, whatever. But he was never going to leave. He's a giant fraud. He's always been a fraud. As for the Red Sox, real quick, sell. The only person who's untouchable to me is Xander Bogaerts. Rafael Devers is a fat blob now. No one's surprised by that. So it's Bogaerts and then Devers are the only two guys who can't go.
You got to sell Bogaerts, and then you just get Lindor in 2 years.
Yeah, I don't think. Yeah, if this is going to go the way it's going to go, then they're not going to. Henry is so invested in Liverpool at this point that he doesn't care about it. And he sees the turning tide. To his credit, soccer is up in popularity across the world and across this country. Baseball, you might as well kick baseball in the nuts because it's dead. Baseball's done. It's a dead sport.
Fair enough.
Messi doesn't like soccer anymore, right?
Who doesn't?
What?
Isn't that guy Messi? What's his name? Doesn't he want to leave?
Messi hates soccer.
Yeah, he hates soccer. Me and him are on the same page now.
He's going to be the next quarterback for the Patriots.
Yeah.
All right, guys, I'm sorry I have to leave early. Thanks for having me back. I'll certainly do it again soon.
Sounds good, Josh.
Adios. Josh with the hot takes left and right all day, every day. Thank you for joining us. So, yeah, Brian, we'll kind of bounce back to this Raptors series. And You and I kind of talked about it before. I kind of really like the Celtics in that matchup. Obviously, without Kawhi Leonard, it's not going to say an easier matchup, but the Celtics are a very guard defensive oriented team. Obviously, Josh brought up some good points, and Siakam and Ibaka, but Ibaka's never really been more than a 10 and 10 guy, and Siakam's been MIA. He's been with Paul George on whatever Galapagos Island they're on this playoff season. So um, obviously, he's still a threat. Obviously, he's still a very good NBA basketball player, but right now you have probably one of the top 5 players in the bubble in Jason Tatum when he's feeling it. And I don't know. I obviously it would have been nice to play without Kyle Lowry because, like you said, he's a very good player. But I still like the Celtics team in the series.
Well, I do know that the NBA had their vote last night. And originally the Clippers and the Lakers are going to leave the bubble.
Mm-hmm.
I was like, oh man, now you got to beat Toronto. You got to beat Toronto now. But something else I want to talk about the meeting they had. So apparently, I just read an article on ESPN. Michael Jordan is the liaison between the players and the owners because he's the only black owner.
Mm-hmm.
And he basically said, "Yeah, you guys should leave. That'd be great." All right, now think about it for a second. And then they're like, "Oh, okay," And the cooler heads prevailed and decided not to leave. They're not playing tonight, which kind of sucks because I got the night off. I wanted to watch the Celtics game. They're pushing it to maybe Friday, but probably Sunday, I heard, or something.
The last thing I heard was it might continue Friday, but there's a stronger chance for it'll continue on the weekend.
Yeah. But I guess they said, LeBron James walked out of a meeting. The real reason he walked out of the meeting, supposedly, and no one's supposed to know this, but as you know, I have a few people in the bubble. And he was upset that Milwaukee decided not to play and didn't consult him about it.
Which is, I've heard a lot of Shams and Woe stuff. A lot of it stems from they weren't upset that the Bucks did it. They were upset at how they did it.
Orlando had no idea. Orlando was warming up for the game. They didn't leave the court until there was 2 minutes and 30 seconds left on the shot clock for the warm-up for the pregame. Mm-hmm. And then Jaylen Brown, who's 23, who, coming into the league, people didn't want to draft him because they thought he was too smart, whatever the hell that meant. But he said yesterday, well, yeah, if we're going to leave, that's great, but only if we're going to make a productive, make some progress here on this issue. If we're just going home because we want to get out of the bubble, then we shouldn't leave. And he goes, and by looking at the social media accounts, we'll know who really means it. Mm-hmm. And I think the players were like, yeah, we want to leave. We're all about social justice. Back in my house in Malibu with my wife and my kids and my mistress and my drugs and my alcohol and my Kardashians. Oh, you mean you want me to be accountable? Oh, I think I'll stay here now.
I'll stay here and say a few words in front of a microphone after.
Yeah, I mean, the life of a professional athlete is from end zone to end zone, from line to line, everybody looking at what you do. But once you step off that field, a lot of those guys are incognito, and they are very good at hiding and making sure you don't know what they're doing or where they are. And they kind of like that privacy, and they kind of have that now, but they kind of feel almost as, I think a lot of them, as African Americans, they feel like they have to comment on it or they got to say something. And I think it's really funny that they want to put pressure on the owners to do something, where these guys are multimillionaires. They have the same connections the owners do. If you grew up in Massachusetts and it's like, hey, my neighbor so-and-so or blah, blah, blah plays for the Celtics, it was like, it's like pulling some strings to meet a guy and talk to a guy and have a conversation. Giannis, I guarantee you he could call the governor of Wisconsin and do something about it.
Supposedly that's what they did last night.
I guarantee
Giannis had him on the phone.
But it's a police investigation. Like, what do you want to do? Tamper with a police investigation? Is that what you guys want? Like, the players have the logos on the back of their uniforms, the phrases. They donated $300 million over the next 5 years to inner city, I don't know the exact term, but whatever it was, that's a lot of money. Mm-hmm. The owners, they haven't been vocal about it because I think they're either buddies with Trump or they're scared of Trump. But they've been letting their money talk. The owners have been doing everything I think possible that the players wanted them to do. I don't think that there's been absolutely no issues there. And I think that if the players walked out, there'd be a lockout. And then I think it would be complete chaos and the collective bargaining agreement would get completely torn up. The players look like hypocrites, though, as Josh said, though, because of the whole China thing.
Mhm.
with the I don't know, they're basically concentration camps they have in China with just separate minorities in China and the way they're handling Hong Kong and a few other issues. And as I've told many people, LeBron James makes a lot more money off sneaker sales in China than he does in the United States. People go, how is that possible? I go, there's a lot more people in China than there's in the United States. And, you're all for social justice and, cops killing, black men in questionable situations where maybe their life is at stake, maybe it's not. I think the Floyd situation, that's an extreme. That's just stupidity. I don't think you can get out of that. You can say the guy is high on fentanyl, you can say he's doing whatever. He might have died of cardiac arrest, in his home, and it wouldn't even have been a story. The guy puts a knee on his neck and everybody sees it, and it's a whole different issue. This issue with this other guy where you respond to a domestic abuse call. He was supposedly tased already. He broke away from cops once. He reached for something. They don't know what's going on. When is it okay to shoot the guy? After he's fired 2 bullets at you? Or do you do it before? I don't know. I wasn't there. But, there's a handful of these issues and they're awful. But when you got mass genocide in another country where you're making millions and millions of dollars off and you're silent, it's hard to put any weight with your argument. And Nike has a lot. Is it Nike and then is it Air Jordan? They're all kind of like a conglomerate or something.
Yeah.
Well, they don't seem to care at all. And everybody knows that the person making the Air Jordans is getting paid 5 cents an hour, if that, with no bathroom breaks, like the guys that make the iPhones.
Mhm.
And I've talked to people before. The reason an iPhone is only $1,000 instead of $10,000 is because it's not made with union labor here in the United States, and no one seems to care.
As we talked about on this show back in October, which seems like forever now,
Right.
when this whole China thing started, we talked about on the show that the reason the NBA spoke out and then all of a sudden, oh, maybe we don't agree with that, is because they lost this giant dip in viewership. And where did that viewership come from?
Right.
So it's an interesting subject matter debate, and I'm sure things will clear up in terms of what is happening. But at the same time, you can't just they can't just expect things to change overnight. This is going to be a long process that these guys are going
I'm
to be
trying
in
to
for a long
figure
time.
out what can you do next. Like how do you prevent police officers from killing people? And is it, if a few people kill police officers, then is it even? Like what's the end game here? Like I don't understand. Like I understand police brutality, but I mean there's all kinds of abuses of power, whether it's I mean you went to Penn State, you know about abuses of power and authority situations.
Mhm.
You had to live that for a year, not personally, but at the school you saw how it was dealt in the media, how it was dealt in the radio, how it was dealt with your friends giving you a hard time, how it was you seeing it firsthand. It's going to happen everywhere, and I don't think, like, it won't just go away. It never will go away, whether it's a police issue or teacher issue. You got all the stuff with the priests and whatnot, and this stuff is always going to happen. I don't know how it's going to get better. I think bringing attention to it, is actually great, but I just don't. It seems like the players are like, okay, well, what we're doing isn't enough. We need to do more to make it stop. And I don't think they get it that it's never gonna stop. I mean, maybe not like blatant abuse like every 5 minutes, but there's no. I don't see if they. I don't think they have an end game to this where then they'd be satisfied. I just don't see it. I don't see them ever being like, okay, now we've made our point and we're happy with how things are. It's just not gonna happen.
And I completely understand their wanting to make a statement like this. I'm fully behind it. But I heard one of the insiders on ESPN was talking today, and they said that I don't think the players understand that skipping or boycotting or walking out, whatever you want to call it, which I guess is a whole other issue because it's the union getting involved, this isn't just skip a few games and everything gets fixed. This is years, if not decades,
Right.
of things that need to change. And if you're fully willing to hop right in and sit out 10, 15 years of your NBA career as a 22-year-old, I would fully applaud you. And I think that's great. It's the same thing kind of with Kaepernick, right? He said, I'll forego my NFL career to go believe in this cause. If you're willing to do that, sure. But don't just sit out 2 games and be like, oh, nothing changed. Why not? Right? There, as long as you know what you're doing and you're fully willing to, whether it's 2 hours, 2 weeks, 2 decades, if you're willing to stick behind that, then go for it. But don't just kind of dog and pony show it to get a few Instagram likes.
Well, like that's like today. Like Jackie Bradley said, he's not playing today, and he's a well-respected member of the team. So they decided not to play, but other teams did. I think Mookie Betts decided not to play, but other teams did. Hockey, I don't know what they're doing. Are they playing today or they're not playing
So
today?
hockey got a lot of flack or pushback last night because they played.
Right.
So tonight they canceled and tomorrow they canceled.
Yeah. So I mean, part of me selfishly is like, listen, the Red Sox suck this year. I'm not a big hockey fan. The Celtics are all I got right now, and if they want to play games and not literally not play games, then I'd be like, come on, like I mean, talk about the shittiest year ever. I mean, you got the police brutality, you got COVID, and then you get teased with sports. It's almost like you meet somebody, you get their phone number, and then they tell you, oh, I just want to be friends. I mean, it's like I wish I just never met the person in the first place. I mean, it's awful. But yeah, I don't know. I don't know what's going to happen. I don't know if they're ever going to be happy. I hate to say they because it almost seems like you're belittling like a movement. But I think every generation, hopefully, things get better. I think there's, 50 years ago, me and you would have a conversation and we use terms that, maybe would be offensive now. I think every generation you get better and better and you learn from it. You make mistakes and you learn from it. But, you and I, we're not black. We don't know what it's like. We've never been pulled over and been racially profiled. But I was telling somebody the other day, 60% of the police officers in Boston are black. Now, what does that mean that they're racist too? And with all this going on, who'd want to be a police officer now anyway? And if you want to talk about getting good candidates, it's like, oh, why isn't there a lot of good teachers? People go, oh, it's a money issue. Oh, it's a this issue. Oh, it's a that issue. If you're a police officer now and you're going to retire, you want to get out of there as soon as possible because who wants to be accountable for this? Who wants to be accountable for the guy who's not doing his job? I saw a thing spray painted in Cambridge on a utility box and said, the good cops hold the bad cops accountable. And I think that's great because they should. But, when they have immunity, whether it's a teachers union, athletic unions, post office union, a guy shows up drunk to work and he's got a union, you're never going to get rid of unions in those sports because of all the great they've done in the past. Mm-hmm. But those unions are the things that protect them from this type of behavior. If it was you do something wrong and you're held accountable, I guarantee you this stuff wouldn't happen. But at these academies and the union, it's like, listen, the laws, the person you're arresting doesn't. We're going to protect you no matter what. Don't worry. If something happens, your brother's got your back. Well, if you're brought up and taught that mentality, guess what? It might go, depending on how you are, if you have an ego, and, you know plenty of people that are police officers or recent police officers. And I'm not saying that kids that might have had, a chip on their shoulder and an ego became police officers later, but we've all seen it where some troublemakers become police officers and vice versa. When these things happen, you're not going to get the best candidates in any situation, any type of job where stuff is where the job is difficult. The intelligent people get the jobs in the industries where if they work hard, that they're rewarded for it. They don't look for jobs in places where they can make a lot of money and do okay and not be held accountable. And that's what it is. Whether it's any profession at all. Mm-hmm. But the problem is, it's like if you're a bad teacher, okay, the kid might not learn math. If you're a bad cop, somebody dies, mm-hmm. And that's why it's much more important.
Yeah, it's such a difficult and such a strange situation to be in. Not that there's no denying the fact that killing unarmed people is a problem. That there's not denying that. It's how did we get here and how do we go forward? Because you look at some of these people that are police officers, they were people that their parents were still directly involved with the initial root cause of owning slaves and the beginning of the police injustice and all that and racially profiling. We're only 2 generations removed from people that still own slaves. And you look at the people that are running for president, a 72 and a 76-year-old. How old do you think their parents were? Like, it's so if you're expecting those people to change things for you now in 2 weeks, there's going to be a long step and a long process.
Well, but I mean, that's a whole other issue, because if you really, like, who wants to go through all that? With social media now, you put your whole family under the microscope when you run for political office. In Waltham, they had a woman, she was a selectman. She ripped out a Blue Lives Matter sign with her husband on video, and she got caught. And they said, listen, if you put the sign back, we're not going to do anything. And she didn't know that they had video of it. And then they go, oh, you mean you? And she's like, it's like, come on, she's never going to be able to run for office again,
Mm-hmm.
But, if you had social media back in the 60s, like with Ted Kennedy killing a girl driving off the side of the road, I mean, he wouldn't, let alone never been senator again. He never would have run for office again. But, as a politician, I don't know anybody who want to put their life, who put their family through it, their wives through it, their kids through it. What if you got a 16-year-old daughter who's on social media? I mean, do you really want to scrutinize every single post that she ever had and ostracize her and have to switch schools? Or maybe your son done something stupid and you got to, no. Smart people stay out of politics, believe it or not. It's the one with the big egos that stay in politics. There are some good people, I'm sure there is, but you do it because you think your stuff doesn't stink, And the problem is, then there's a national election and people your age are like, I don't like either one of these guys. What do I do?
Mm-hmm.
And it's been like that way for how many elections now?
Yep.
So,
and so it's just a ever repeating cycle in that business. But as we kind of wrap down time here, we got some interesting conversations in. Obviously, Josh was here and had to leave. Yep. We thank him for being here. Brian, thank you for putting this on. Yep. You'll get your better host next week, hopefully. Dan will return from whatever deep dungeon he's been in, aka New York, and we'll definitely see you again next time.
That's right.